Well, we also have got some more breaking news coming out in the last week since the last podcast, of course, gents. And we did speculate about it a little bit. There was a lot of talk on it, of course. And it's finally confirmed that Dani Pedrosa will return to some racing action at the Styrian Grand Prix, which is the first race, the first Austrian one back after the summer break. Also KTM's home race, and having been a KTM test rider for since 2019, Keith, he's finally getting a run out during the race. It's going to be brilliant to see him back, isn't it?
It is going to be brilliant to see him back. He's well in the deep end, though. I have to say that, okay, Red Bull sponsorship, Red Bull Ring is where we are. You know, he knows the KTM, he knows the track really, really well, but there's nothing like full-blown racing miles to hone your final skills. There's no doubt about it, he's a fast man. He's going to be fast. Is he going to be fast enough to compete in the top 10? Tell you what, I still think that's a massive, massive achievement if he does. We'll wait and see. Dani Pedrosa, no fall on a motorbike, knows the KTM, knows the track, but I still think that everything has moved on. And when you've not got race miles under your belt, same thing will happen if Calcraso, if that is announced at any stage, if he does replace Morbidelli. We've been waiting for that particular thing, that announcement to come. I mean, if Cal gets a run at 2 Red Bull Rings and then Silverstone, by the time we get to Silverstone, he might be up to speed. But I think come back in a one-off ride as a wildcard in the frantic kind of MotoGP world that we live in nowadays, I think that's a really big deal if you manage to pull something off a bit there. We'll see. I don't underestimate what Dani can do, but all the same, I think it's going to be a real task.
Never underestimate the power of 31 wins either. And actually, Pete, what's really interesting is this will be the first time he's raced not on a Honda.
That's right, yeah. Entire Grand Prix career was with Honda. So, you know, it's just, I think no one expected it. As Keith's saying, you know, he's not just out for 1 year, he's been out for a couple of seasons. And to come back, having not, you know, okay, Troy Bayliss came back, had that sensational win, didn't he, in 06? But I mean, he'd been racing Superbike. He was still a full-time racer. I mean, Dani's just been doing test riding duties, and now he's putting himself in the mix. It's a brave move, as Keith says. It's nothing to underestimate the challenge ahead, and I'm sure Dani isn't. You know, he says he's doing this to enhance his testing, if you like, and to understand what the riders need more and things like that. And, you know, it is so hard to predict what's possible, because you have to try and predict what's possible for KTM first, don't you? And then, you know, like last year's races, none of them went the full distance. You know, they were both interrupted. So we didn't get to see any race that went the full distance. So we didn't get to see what tyre wear might have done, who might have had fuel issues. You know, the only thing we probably know is that Ducati is still going to be faster. I mean, sorry, Keith, yeah, go on.
One thing's for sure, though, Pete, the power to weight ratio is going to be pretty much in KTM's
I was just going to say, we also know the KTM is fast this year. Yeah. So, you know. Yeah.
And with Dani on it, weighing 6 stone or whatever he does, he is going to absolutely fly off the line at somewhere like the Red Bull Ring.
Well, it's going to be brilliant to see him back, isn't it?
Yeah, it'll be great to see him back. To say 31 wins, I mean, that is, I think, you know, we were talking about Randy Momola before. I think he's one of those names. Max Biaggi's another one. Guys that won a lot of races but didn't win the world title. But no one comes close to Pedrosa's record, you know, as far as number of race wins and without a title. You know, he's one of those, the aliens as they were known, we've spoken about before, that were dominating for much of, you know, so many years in MotoGP, but he didn't get the title. And I think, you know, he sort of alluded that maybe he would have liked to have perhaps tried a different bike, you know, maybe a Yamaha. You know, he was close to Petronas. You know, I mean, Quartararo, let's remember, he got that ride because Pedrosa decided to retire. This is the quirks of fate, isn't it? But, you know, Dani, they were talking to Dani, and Dani was openly considering it. In the end, he thought, you know, my time is right to step back. Now he's obviously decided the time is right to come back one more time. So it's great for MotoGP, and looking forward to see how he'll do.
Well, really excited to have Pedrosa back on the grid. That's for the Styrian Grand Prix on the KTM, and just a couple of more weeks until we get some racing action as well. Now, I actually just wanted to get your opinion as well, and start with Keith on this. Garrett Gerloff stepping in recently in MotoGP with you know, good solid performances coming out, you know, not much experience on the MotoGP bike and putting in some decent performances. Now back in Superbikes, of course, signed a deal recently to stay on at Yamaha, which seems like quite an early move as well, and that takes him out of the running for any potential MotoGP seats, but also getting himself involved in a little bit of an incident with Toprak at the weekend. What are your thoughts on that? Because a lot of people saying that Gerloff was a little bit in the wrong there, I think, is a polite way of saying it.
I was going to say, Harry, your politeness just is wonderful,
Always.
because it was. My mum would be absolutely happy to have you as a second son, by the way. The point being is that Gerloff was out of order. I mean, he was out. He had a crash in Superpole, I think it was, and put himself in a position where he was starting from a long way back. Got himself up to the third row of the grid to start the race that he had that clash with Toprak in. And he tried too much too soon. I mean, turn one of the full race distance was just stupid. I mean, it was brain out time. It's not what you do. Showed a bit of overconfidence, and then a bit later on, having had to go through pit lane as a ride, he ends up crashing anyway, trying to come back from there. But it was one of, you have those kind of weekends sometimes where whatever you do, he was fast, and he deserved much better than what he ended up giving himself. But the point being is that that's the way some weekends pan out sometimes. It's Toprak I feel sorry for. I mean, Toprak got wiped out. Toprak came into the weekend with a slight advantage in the championship. Finds him, and I mean, Johnny Rea, you don't give Jonathan Rea, 3 race wins, bang, he's 37 points in the lead again now, Jonathan Rea. Chances of anybody catching him now throughout the rest of the season are pretty minimal compared with Jonathan Rea's hit rate is so good everywhere else as well. So I can't see anybody catching it. But Toprak had a real advantage coming into this race, got taken out by a fellow Yamaha man in Gerloff. Talking to the contract, Toprak, obviously, Razgalioglu, has signed for Yamaha to stay in World Superbikes. Gerloff has signed for another year, I think it is, for his. So he puts himself in sync with everyone else's MotoGP contract, I think, by the end of 2022. I think I'm right saying. But I think the big press at the moment is why are these guys signing for World Superbike when MotoGP is the premier class? And they're just giving themselves a little bit more of a breathing space, I would suggest. Gerloff is comfortable where he is at the moment. He can win a world title in World Superbike. That will be his aim, to do that next year. And to go to MotoGP as a World Superbike champion, you've got some very famous names in the past that have done the same. Colin Edwards is one of my favourites, of course. To go into MotoGP as a World Superbike champion is a pretty big thing. Should he have done it? Shouldn't he have done it? I think he's just bought himself some time, that's all. Given himself that little extra time to get himself up to speed into Europe and get acquainted with us weirdos.
Fair enough. Keith, is that pretty much what you're hearing as well, ear to the ground?
Well, firstly, I was going to say that, Jonathan Rea is the other big rumour, isn't he, about superbike riders that might be interested in MotoGP. Now, the interesting thing is that these announcements are being made. It kind of suggests that there is a plan that's sort of slowly falling into place with Yamaha and these vacant seats that they've got in MotoGP, or we believe they have. We know they've got at least one, and we think it's going to be several more. Now, there's no rush to announce people. So announcing Toprak, announcing Gerloff, it suggests that they know what they want to do, and they probably are confident that they're going to get what they want. Now, there's still a lot of names that we're hearing on this list of potential riders, isn't it? As say Jonathan Rea is never say never. His words on the weekend, which are getting a lot of people excited. So, Razvan Razali, the team put out that press release. I think it was last week. A bit of an interview with him where he sort of just calmed things down a bit. As we're not going to announce anything for a few races and things like that. We now hear that Gerloff probably didn't have any offer from Petronas, so it just gives the impression that they know what they're after. And Razvan said a few times in that interview, young riders, he said young riders know what they can do with our team, and he gives the example of Quartararo and Morbidelli. So I think we kind of know certainly where his mind is as far as looking to the future. We're hearing another Fernandez name, not Raul, but Augusto, who's another Moto2 rider. Now, I've heard that from a good friend of mine as well, good journalist, good source. And, to be honest, I'd heard of it to do with the Moto2 team at Petronas, but now we're hearing maybe he might not be out of the running at the MotoGP team. So is this another name that's in the mix there? It's just interesting, as we say, that it's been announced now. They could have waited. They could have just said, look, Gareth, sign this contract, give it 2 months, and then we'll announce, look, will you be going to MotoGP or will you be staying? They decided, no, announce now, you'll be staying in Superbike. And that tells me that they expect that to happen. They don't want to be announcing someone in Superbike and then 2 months later announcing them in MotoGP. It just doesn't look great from an organizational point of view, does it? So I think I think the interesting thing for me is that it probably says that they know who they want and they're perhaps confident they're going to get them. But really, it's a lot of names on the list still.
So many names. I feel like all summer break long, it's just been Vinales has caused all this trouble. Now, where do all the pieces fall into place? And I hope that's answered as well. I think Barry Allen sent in that question on whether the Johnny Rea to a Yamaha is a waste of a factory seat or a serious challenger. And I think, what do you think from that? Is it a waste or is it a serious challenge? Because he said never say never. He's teasing us, but clearly it surely wouldn't be a waste.
No, it definitely won't be a race. Johnny Rea knows his way. Jonathan Rea, rather. It's quite funny when you hear commentators call him Johnny Rea. Johnny Rea's his dad. Jonathan Rea is Jonathan Rea. Let's get that distinction right. That's why Johnny Rea is the good old boy, and Jonathan Rea is the fast kid.
Yeah, Barry, get it right. Unbelievable.
Yeah, no, I wasn't criticising Barry at all. But it's funny. I was listening to the broadcast over the weekend, and they kept calling him Johnny all the time. And old fellas like me get into that because obviously we used to talk about Johnny Rea, but that's Dad. Jonathan will not be wasting his time. Jonathan is a weapon. He's got it worked out. He's got class. I think if he goes into retirement without going to MotoGP, I feel that will play on his mind probably for the rest of his life. If he gets an opportunity in MotoGP on a proper motorcycle, proper contract, all the bits and pieces you need to do the job, then surely a hurrah in MotoGP is where he needs to go. He's definitely got that analytical skill. He's got a special talent, Jonathan Rea. And it would be very disappointing for us, and I think probably for him, if he doesn't get that last shot in MotoGP. He's not too old. I mean, that's he's still got a couple of good years in him yet to be able to make that work. I'm really excited. I mean, if there is that opportunity there for him, but it's going to be down to whether politically he can put it together properly. It's got to be a proper, full-blown factory run to be worthwhile.
Well, we'll have to watch this space on that one. Well, thank you, Barry, for sending that one in. Jamie, we'll get to Jamie sent in a very good question. We'll get to that a little later on as well. So thank you for sending in all your questions as well. Do send them all in. CrashNet, all the socials, Crash MotoGP, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We're on all of them. So we will get to them as much as we can. So thank you for sending in all your listener questions, and we'll get through as many as we can. Let's start with Alex, actually, who picks up on something we were discussing the last couple of weeks. Of course, we're losing a few rounds off the calendar week by week. We lost Australia. We're losing some more of the Asian rounds as well, and threatening to lose quite a few because, as we discussed last week, once one goes, it's a bit of a worry that the rest will follow like dominoes. But on that, Alex has asked, do you think MotoGP could return to some older tracks like Suzuka, Donington, Laguna Seca, Hockenheim, Istanbul, Kyalami, if there was a few improvements made for safety?
You can't make the kind of improvements that you've got to make for safety just at a knee-jerk kind of reaction, and I can't see Dorna risking their safety record, especially in light of what's happened this weekend, with a slightly iffy track. They've got to be homologated. That takes time. You've got to have representations going out to the tracks to see what that has to be done, and then they have to put that into place. So I can't see tracks that are sort of borderline being introduced just like that. I can see double headers coming our way again. I mean, we're going to COTA later on, Circuit of the Americas in Texas. Will they run a double header there? Quite possibly. Will Malaysia keep going to Sepang? Will they run a double header there? If it does, will they run a back-to-back weekend with that? It's a nightmare scenario, and you know that Dorna have got right up to Plan Z ready. We talked last week about the plans for Thailand. I spoke to I'll name him now, Mike Trimby, just before we recorded this thing last week. And he said to me, look, we've got a protocol in place for Thailand. It's all agreed with the organisers, with the promoters, with the government in Thailand. Within a day of us recording that, the very next day on the Tuesday when our podcast went out, it was all blown to pieces by the fact that the Thais had decided that they weren't going to be able to go ahead with it. And Dorna were put on their back foot with that at that particular point, because Dorna didn't even know that the Thai government had made that decision until the Tuesday. So it's something that can happen overnight for Dorna, even though they've got every plan in place and every protocol in place. If a government or a region decides that they can't hold that race meeting, Dorna are screwed. and then they have to go to the next plan, whatever the next level is for trying to keep the amount of rounds up there and for us. But other than having double headers like we've got coming up with the Styrian and the Austrian Grand Prix at the Red Bull Ring, what else can they do? Let's have a double header at Silverstone. Now that really will be something. I'd vote for that straight away. Double header at Silverstone, and stay there the entire week. Like the fans can stay there Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and make a real festival of it. We can all be drunk for 3 days. Perfect.
A double header at Silverstone, I think, is something we could all get behind as well. Thank you, Alex, for sending in that question. Right. Adam Keeble has asked, though, on the subject of calendar changes, with the current COVID situation, of course, forcing several tracks off the calendar, if you had free rein to add any new circuits to the series, which ones would you choose?